They'll tell strangers Grayridge is quiet because it's small. They'll say it's the kind of mountain town where people keep to themselves, where the snow comes early and stays late, where the pines crowd in close like they're trying to listen. That's what they'll tell you. What they won't tell you, not until the fire's low and the dark has settled into the spaces between the trees, is that Grayridge isn't quiet because it's peaceful. Grayridge is quiet because it's learned what sound can cost. Every winter when the storm rolls down from the mountains and the wind starts to howl, someone goes missing. Not every week, not every night. Only when the wind rises high enough to cover the world in noise. Because in Grayridge, there's a rule the old-timers say like a prayer, and the young ones learn like a bruise. When the wind howls, it can move. When the wind dies, it has to stop. And the old folks would add one more thing, always in a lower voice, like saying it too loud might teach them out in a new trick. It can whisper whenever it wants, but it can't cross the snow unless the wind is loud enough to hide the sound of it. No one in town argues about it anymore. Not after all these years. Not after the footprints that began where no person could have started. Not after the doors found open in the morning, snow drifted inside like it belonged there. Not after the voices. Because the worst part isn't that something hunts in the blizzard. The worst part is that it calls for you by name. Evan Mercer rolled into Grayridge 2 days before the forecast storm, which is exactly the kind of timing storms seem to enjoy. He wasn't a tourist. He didn't carry a camera or ask about the best local diner. He carried a toolbox, a headlamp, and the quiet confidence of a man who believed most problems had wires. Grayridge's radio tower had been down for a week. The mayor's message was short. We need communications back before the next storm. Evan drove the last stretch on a road cut into pine and rock. Snowbanks rose high on both sides. Old storms packed down into hard, dirty walls. Above the mountains, the sky sagged with that heavy gray that promised more. At the town line, a wooden sign leaned slightly, paint worn thin. Welcome to Grayridge, population 612. Please drive slow, please drive quiet. Evan slowed without meaning to, squinting at that last line. Drive quiet. He shook his head, almost smiling to himself, and kept going. That's when he heard it. A voice, faint as a thread, carrying across the snow from the trees. Evan? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Nobody stood on the roadside. No headlights in the rear view. No footprints near the tree line. And Evan hadn't told anyone his name yet. He'd barely crossed into the town. He cracked his window a few inches, letting the cold bite in. Hello? He called. A pause. Then his own voice answered back from the pines, perfectly matched. Hello? Evan rolled the window up so fast that glass shivered in its track. He drove the rest of the way into town without speaking again. The motel was the only one in Grayridge, which meant it wasn't really a motel. It was where strangers stayed so locals could keep an eye on them. Inside, the lobby felt wrong in a way Evan couldn't name at first. No television, no radio, no music. Even the soda machine seemed to hum quietly, like it had learned manners. Behind the desk sat a woman with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. Her name tag read Cynthia. Before Evan could introduce himself, Cynthia asked, "Do you have a radio in your truck?" "Yes," Evan said, startled. "Turn it off before sunset," she replied. "And don't use your horn. Not here." Evan gave a short laugh, the kind that tried to turn fear into a joke. "Is that a town rule?" Cynthia's eyes stayed on his, steady and flat. "It's how we keep people," she said. Then she slid a ledger across the counter. It wasn't a guest book. It was a list. Names written in neat columns, dates beside them. Every date marked by a storm. At the bottom, the newest entry sat fresh in ink. Mika Lorne, January 17th. Evan looked up. Missing person? Cynthia nodded once. Every winter? He asked. Every storm, Cynthia corrected. Evan tried to solve it the way he solved everything. Exposure, avalanche, wildlife, bad roads. Cynthia watched his face like she could see the gears turning. Animals leave pieces, she said quietly. Evan's throat tightened. Cynthia leaned forward, voice dropping. When the wind howls, she said, you stay inside, you stay quiet, and you never answer anything that knows your name. Evan stared at her, and for the first time, he believed the town's silence wasn't superstition. It was training. What is it? He asked. Cynthia glanced toward the window as if the glass might be listening back. It's the storm's mouth, she said, and it learned how to talk. Sheriff Calder met Evan at dawn. Calder was broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, and he watched the tree line the way other men watched the road. His gaze kept drifting to the woods like it expected the woods to lean forward and answer. He didn't shake Evan's hand. He just nodded toward the mountain trail. You fix the tower, Calder said, and you don't take your time. Evan adjusted his strap. I'm not here to sightsee. Good, Calder replied. They climbed toward the ridge where the radio tower stood, a thin skeleton against the pale sky. Along the trail, Evan noticed odd little bundles hanging from branches. Wind chimes, but not the pretty kind. These were made from keys, spoons, bolts, bits of pipe, anything metal that could ring. What are those for? Evan asked. So we know when it can move, Calder said. Evan frowned. The wind? Calder didn't stop walking. No, he said. The thing that wears it. Up here the air was still. The chimes didn't ring at all. Evan tried not to feel relieved. At the ridge, the tower was worse than expected. Ice sealed the access panel. A snapped line dangled twisted and useless. Evan started working, fingers stiff from cold. Calder watched the woods. Storm hits tonight, Calder said. I'll have it up before then, Evan answered. That's when the voice drifted out of the trees. Sheriff? It sounded like a man, tired and cold. Calder went rigid, like someone had hooked a wire into his spine. The voice came again, closer. Calder, help me. Evan's mind went straight to the ledger, to the name, Mika Lorne. Evan leaned forward instinctively. Calder lifted a hand, sharp as a warning sign. Don't speak. The voice sharpened, pleading. It's me, it said. It's Mika. I can't feel my hands. Evan took one step without thinking. Calder grabbed Evan's jacket and yanked him back. Evan whispered, He's alive. Calder didn't answer. He mouthed one word. No. The pines didn't sway, not really. But high up, a few needles trembled, like the mountain had just taken its first shallow breath. And then the voice changed. It became Cynthia's voice. Evan? Evan's stomach dropped. And then it became Evan's own voice, calm and perfect. Evan, it said, you left your door unlocked. A faint metallic tinkle sounded down the trail. one wind chime moved. The air stirred. Calder's eyes tightened. "The wind's up," he breathed. And Evan understood something that made his blood run cold. It hadn't called while the air was still. He waited until it could move. Calder shoved Evan toward the maintenance shed, a cramped metal box half buried in snow near the tower's base. They slipped inside. Calder slammed the door. In the dim light of Evan's headlamp, the shed walls looked thin enough to tear. Outside, the wind began to howl. And beneath that howl came something quieter, more precise. A scrape. Something dragging itself across the snow, moving only during the loudest gusts, stopping dead when the wind dipped, then continuing the moment the howl rose again. Then a voice whispered right outside the door, soft as a breath on cold glass. Evan's own voice. "I know you're in there," it said. "Open up." Evan covered his mouth because he felt the reflex to answer, to deny, to swear, to plead. Anything. Calder leaned close and whispered, barely audible. "It doesn't need to break in," he said. "It needs you to invite it." The wind slammed the shed. The scrape circled. Then the voice changed again, smooth as a hand changing masks. It became Evan's mother's voice, gentle, familiar. "Honey," it said. "Open up, I'm cold." Evan's eyes stung. Not from wind, from memory. Calder stared at the door like he wanted to burn it down. The wind dipped. Silence sharpened, sudden and unnatural. The scraping stopped instantly. And then the wind howled again and the scraping resumed, closer. The town's rule wasn't just a phrase. It was physics. The wind was its blanket. The howl hid the movement. And when the blanket slipped, it froze. They didn't leave the shed until the wind softened. Outside, the ridge looked untouched again, like the storm had never leaned its weight against the world. Except for one mark in the snow, a long groove, wide and shallow, dragged through the powder. Inside the groove were impressions like fingers, hands. Evan stared. His mind tried to make it human, tried to make it possible. Calder's voice cut in. "Don't stare," he said. "You don't want it learning what your fear looks like." They stepped over the mark and descended fast, the chimes motionless now, but Evan couldn't stop imagining them ringing. That night, Grayridge sealed itself up like a ship in rough water. Doors locked, curtains drawn, radios switched off. Evan sat in his motel room with the lights dim, listening to the storm arrive in layers. First the snow, then the wind testing the corners of the building, then the howl, full-throated, hungry. And with the howl came the voices. At first they sounded distant, scattered through the storm. A man calling for help, a woman crying. Then something closer, too close, right outside Evan's window. "Evan," his mother again. "Open up, sweetheart. I'm cold." Evan kept still. The voice slid lower, as if it crouched beside the heater vent near the floor. "Honey," it whispered. "You can talk to me." Evan pressed his fist against his mouth until it hurt. In the hallway came the scrape again, masked by the wind. Slow, patient. Then the doorknob turned a fraction. Evan's heart kicked hard. He had locked it. He had checked it. The knob turned again during a gust, and stopped when the wind dipped. Then the wind rose and the knob turned again. The pattern was perfect. Move when the wind howls, freeze when it dies. A new voice came then, bright with panic, a child sobbing. "I'm lost," it said. "Please, I can't find my house." Evan didn't move. The sobbing wavered, as if the voice was testing different notes. Then Cynthia's voice appeared right outside the door, urgent. "Evan, it's the sheriff. He's missing. I need you now." Evan's hand lifted toward the lock without permission. And then the voice slipped, just slightly. It said his name wrong. Evan. 2 syllables. Crooked, like a mouth-learning human. Evan froze. He lowered his hand. He didn't answer. The wind carried the voices away down the hall to another door, another crack, another mistake waiting to happen. Morning came gray and tired. The storm left drifts piled high like the town had been buried and dug out again. Evan stepped into the lobby and found Cynthia at the desk with the ledger open, pen in hand. Sheriff Calder stood by the window, staring out the street like he was counting what remained. Evan exhaled. "You're alive." Calder nodded once. "Stay quiet." Evan's eyes went to the ledger. Did it take someone? Cynthia paused. Then she slid the book toward him. A new name at the bottom. Fresh ink. Ruth Dalka, February 1st. Evan's throat tightened. "Who is she?" he asked. "2 doors down," Cynthia said softly. "Older. Lives alone." Calder spoke without turning. Her front door was open. Snow drifted inside. Evan swallowed. "Tracks?" Calder nodded. "One set went from her door into the street," he said. "Barefoot." Evan blinked. "Barefoot?" Cynthia whispered. "No one goes out barefoot." Calder continued, voice low and controlled. And the other set of tracks started in the middle of the street. Evan felt cold spread through him, as if it didn't walk from anywhere, Calder said. As if it only needed the wind loud enough to cover it, and then it could simply be there. They followed the tracks to the church steps, and then they ended. Not inside, not away, just gone. Calder pointed through the window. In the churchyard, the snow sat wrong, smoothed into a low mound right beside the steps, as if someone had patted it down with careful hands. Cynthia's voice dropped. "That mound," she whispered, "is the last thing the snow covered." Evan stared at it. Calder turned slightly, and his eyes looked older than yesterday. "That's where the missing go," he said. "Not their bodies." Evan's mouth was dry. "Then what?" Calder's voice came out like a confession. "Their voices," he said. Cynthia's pen hovered above the ledger. "Every storm," she murmured. "It comes back with more." Evan looked down at the list again, and that's when he saw it. A blank line filled in halfway down the page, ink darker than Cynthia's. A name that hadn't been there before. Evan Mercer, February 8th. Evan's breath stopped. Cynthia's hand trembled. "I didn't write that," she whispered. Outside, the air was still. The wind had died. But in the quiet, Evan heard it anyway, faint as a secret tucked behind the walls. "Evan." And somewhere far up the mountain trail, One wind chime gave a single soft tinkle, not from wind, from weight shifting, as if something out there had been holding perfectly still and had just remembered it would be allowed to move again soon. If you enjoyed this nightmare, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next tale. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you heard a loved one calling from a blizzard? Until next time, stay warm, stay quiet, and if the wind starts to howl, don't open the door. Good night.